fuck Jon Jones, and fuck everybody who's allowing him to do the shit he's doing right now. What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by Nwadei MMA, where I give you my thoughts, but more importantly, ask for you guys' thoughts, because you guys are the MMA community. Guys, if you missed my last video, I did a breakdown on Ilia Topuria, his style, the martial arts it derives from, what he likes to use to set up all his punches, and everything to do with Ilia Topuria. So if you haven't checked that one out, I suggest you guys go ahead and do that. And I also wanted to let you guys know that we had maybe one of the best conversations about a fighter's mentality and their mindset and what they're actually thinking and going through when they go through these fights on my podcast, The Will vs. The Way, with Ian Varela and his teammate Nico De La Salle, who are both MMA fighters who train under the infamous Ray Borg. So if you want to check that one out, or you want to check out the full uncensored and unedited version, you could check out the link to my Patreon. I'll leave the link in the description. But with that being said, you're watching the real breakdown of Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic at UFC 309. Let's get into it. Okay, guys, first and foremost, fuck Jon Jones, and fuck everybody who's allowing him to do the shit he's doing right now. What do I mean by that? So before we get into his breakdown and about the X's and O's between him and Stipe Miocic, I'm gonna do it a little bit different this time. I'm not gonna do a complete film analysis because I feel like those videos may be a little too long. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments down below, but I'm gonna tell you about the styles, the X's and O's, and give you my breakdown like that, and then I'll show some clips about what I'm talking about as well. That way you guys still have a visual to go off of. But before we get into the breakdown, we gotta preview everything that's going on and what led up to UFC 309. So Jon Jones fought Dominic Reyes. This is where this all started. It was about 4 years in the past, right? As I take a sip of my coffee. And he had maybe the closest fight of his life, where there was a very controversial decision because a lot of people thought that Dominic Reyes did enough to get the win. However, after having that fight and the close fight before with Thiago Santos, Jon Jones decided maybe it was time to retire or at least move up a division. Now, he took 3 years to move up to heavyweight, while Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou were at the top of the division. Stipe Miocic ended up beating Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou made his comeback to end up beating Stipe Miocic during this time. Jon Jones took 3 years off in order to gain what was maybe 10 pounds of muscle. Keep in mind, light heavyweights are just heavyweights that cut weight. So Jon Jones has always walked around 230, 225 maybe, at the smallest. And 3 years later, he gets up to, what, 245? So that's maybe 10 or 15 pounds that he gained, and took 3 years to do it. And that was his excuse for not fighting Francis Ngannou sooner. Now, I am fully aware that the UFC probably wasn't giving him the amount of money he wanted in order to fight Francis, and that was probably a big reason for the layoff, of course. But this is just to talk about the whole narrative of him being a heavyweight champion, the heavyweight champion, which he's not. Francis Ngannou is still the lineal heavyweight champion of the world, and Jon Jones is somewhere in the middle after coming back 3 years later to beat Cyril Gane in dominant fashion. Now, when he did this and he came to the heavyweight division and beat Cyril Gane, who a lot of top people, including myself, thought would give him major problems, everyone was just bad goat, right? And you know, there is real arguments for him being the greatest of all time. I mean, most people will look at his record and call him the greatest of all time, given the fact that he hasn't really had a real loss. But again, the reason I'm saying fuck Jon Jones and fuck Jon Jones fans is because of what he's doing right now. Now Jon Jones is fighting Stipe Miocic, a guy who he's a 6-1 favorite over, and you know, a lot of people are thinking that maybe he shouldn't even be having this fight. He should be fighting a guy named Tom Aspinall. Oh. Jon Jones fans don't like that name. They don't, for whatever reason. But Jon Jones comes out in an interview recently and says that, you know, after he's done fighting Stipe, if he wins, that there will be no other fight for him other than maybe an Alex Pereira. And no real MMA fan no non-casual, no person who's been an MMA fan for over 5 years cares really to see that fight. If it gets made, of course we're gonna watch it, but everybody in their right mind knows that Jon Jones only wants that fight because he knows that Alex Pereira's chances of stopping his wrestling are slim to none. Sure, there's an occasional knee or uppercut that he could land. Sure, there's a situation where Jon Jones gets clipped by a left hook before he can even shoot a takedown. Sure. But we know how annoying it is for people to go against Khamzat Chimaev, who just comes out right out the gate, shoots a double leg, and how many people are really able to stop that? As soon as he gets to your legs, immediately the skill sets show themselves in the wrestling department. And that's what we understand would happen with Alex Pereira and Jon Jones. And because of Jon Jones saying this, everyone can assume that he's avoiding Tom Aspinall. Now, is this your GOAT? For all of you Jon Jones fans, is this your GOAT? Again, we're not getting into the breakdown yet. This is more of a preview and to get an understanding. But the reason I ask this is because some of the reasons he's using for saying he isn't going to fight Tom Aspinall is because, one, he doesn't want to gamble his legacy to fight some up-and-comer who hasn't proved anything. I mean, all this shit just makes no sense. And, you know, if he's trying to get some emotion out of some fans, he got some out of me. Okay? Because I'm fully on board the fuck Jon Jones train. Now, even though Jon Jones is a huge inspiration to why I started watching MMA and even why I started fighting myself. I mean, I was a huge Jon Jones fan, and you know, something that a lot of you guys maybe don't know, other than my long time and loyal subscribers who've stayed with me through multiple channels, is the very first YouTube video I posted was actually a Jon Jones documentary, which is now taken down because that channel was removed, but it had over 1 million views, and he started up my whole YouTube process. So I am very grateful for Jon Jones, and I was a huge fan, but this is just not my go. Because the same reason he's saying that he won't fight Tom Aspinall is the same reason why Shogun and Rampage Jackson and all the people who gave him his name fought him. I mean, he was the young guy in those situations, and now Tom Aspinall would be the young guy. And to say he's undeserving after not only claiming the interim championship, which has just as much value as yours, and then defended his interim belt and has 6 wins over the top 10 heavyweights in the world today. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous. And they say it would do nothing for his legacy. This fight nearly does nothing to his legacy. We have to start thinking about context when we talk about how these fighters are remembered. Because, yes, Stipe Miocic is the greatest heavyweight of all time and is the most accoladed heavyweight of all time. But accolades aren't everything. You know, that's why people will still choose Cain Velasquez as the GOAT over him sometimes, or even a Fabricio Verdum or Fedor Emelianenko, because accolades just aren't everything, which is the same reason why some people choose GSP or Demetrius Johnson over Jon Jones, like myself. But getting into the breakdown now. So leave your comments down below on how you find this whole situation, but I think most MMA fans are on board with the whole fuck Jon Jones train, so I don't think that I'm gonna get too much hate for saying that. But let me know in the comments down below as we get into the X's and O's for this breakdown. Okay, so again, let's be real. If we're talking about the tangibles, which we have to talk about first before the intangibles to break this one down, Stipe Miocic is, let me look at this just to be right. Stipe is 42 years old, fighting a 36-year-old Jon Jones. Stipe Miocic also hasn't fought in 3 years. His last fight was a knockout loss to Francis Ngannou, where he didn't look very good. Even though he did clip Francis a little bit, he didn't look very good. And then before that, he was coming off of 3 wars with Daniel Cormier and a war with Francis Ngannou. That's 4 wars he was coming off of before that Francis Ngannou knockout. So then he takes 3 years off. Probably good for his brain, it's good for his health, but to be honest, after 3 wars like that, fighters are not the same. Every fight takes something out of you. That fighter is not the same fighter that stepped into the octagon 3 years ago against Francis Ngannou. And it's not that he's better, his body-wise, it's worse. Another thing we have to consider is we don't know how much Stipe's been training in the time off. We don't know how his camps have been. Stipe's a very quiet guy, so we don't get much knowledge on that. And what we know from Jon Jones is that he had a fight about a year ago with Cyril Gane. He's the younger guy. He did have a pectoral injury, which is pretty especially for a wrestler, but he's been in and around the game. He's constantly around everything that's happening in today's MMA, which is an advantage. So just based off of the tangibles, everything is leading the way of Jon Jones. Now, when you talk of the intangibles, this is where things get interesting, because we all have the assumption that Jon Jones is going to walk through Stipe Miocic. Stipe's old, Stipe's past his prime, Stipe is this and that, and therefore Jon Jones will win. However, I knew this was going to happen. As the fight gets closer, it isn't seeming that one-sided. Now, don't get me wrong, I still think Jon Jones is the favorite, but when we start talking about the intangibles, you have to see Jon Jones' style. Jon Jones is a wrestler first, right? He came up wrestling, and then he started implementing a very interesting striking style to supplement his wrestling, to where he would poke and prod guys due to him having extremely long arms and limbs. He would poke and prod guys, then when they blitz into range, he would shoot for the takedown. He uses the clinch very well. He is by no means a world-class kickboxer. It's more MMA striking that he uses, which is great for MMA. And he's also a master at making adjustments, right? That's kind of Jon Jones' style in a nutshell. However, places where Jon Jones has faltered or has shown weakness is in the boxing range. If you're able to keep it in boxing range like Dominic Reyes was for a good amount of time, he tends to use this long guard and lean out of ways, and even ends up running around the octagon sometimes to escape and not be cornered. And this is usually when he can't get the takedown and can't really find his range yet. He's always had this little hole in his boxing, but it's been supplemented by all the other things he's great at that not many people have been able to find his chin. And that's probably the only thing I can say that Jon Jones has a weakness in, other than maybe being on his back, but we haven't really seen him there. On the other side with Stipe Miocic, if we're talking about his intangibles, his style, this dude is a Golden Gloves champion in boxing. He was a D1 wrestler. He has just the two bases that make up American mixed martial arts, wrestling and boxing. He has implemented a couple different kicks, just low kicks mainly. Sometimes he'll go to the body, but he's mainly boxing and wrestling. He uses his wrestling very defensively. He hasn't used it offensively in I don't know how long. He did take down Daniel Cormier. He was able to fatigue Daniel Cormier. I think he is also one of those guys who can just embrace the grind of a fight, much like Jon Jones can. And intangible to intangible, these people are both champions with hearts of champions, and neither of them will falter mentally. That's one thing we have to understand. Also, but some of the weaknesses we have seen in Stipe is the clinch and getting hit while going in and out of the clinch, just being undisciplined with his hands in and out of the clinch. That's how he got knocked out by Daniel Cormier. That's what Daniel was trying to implement in the second and third fight, and that's how he connected a bunch on him. And so we know that that's a weakness. And then maybe even being on his back as well could be a weakness. I mean, any wrestler on their back isn't really very good. We saw that Daniel Cormier was able to land a couple shots, keep him on his back for a little while in that second fight, which worries me a little bit going against Jon Jones, who we know is going to shoot. Now, as far as how this fight will play out and how their styles mesh together, Stipe, like we just said, is mainly a boxer and a wrestler, so he's going to be looking to defend Jon's takedowns. Jon is going to shoot. He even said it in his live stream with Gordon Ryan that a lot of people watched, that if we take him down, we win. Right? And that's generally how Jon Jones has won in the past. However, given the fact that Stipe has good wrestling defense, I mean, it's not just a given that he's going to be able to take him down. I mean, similar to Dominic Reyes, who stuffed all his takedowns. Dominic Reyes is mainly boxing and throws a little bit of kicks, but he just defended takedowns and boxed, really. And that gave Jon Jones all the problems in the world. We have to remember that this is not the Jon Jones who was destroying his opposition. This is the same Jon Jones who, in reality, had a very close split decision win with Thiago Santos, which I low-key thought Thiago won with 2 blown-out knees. Fucking crazy. And had an arguable loss to Dominic Reyes at light heavyweight, and then moved up 3 years later to have a fight with Ciryl Gane, where he did look a bit sloppy on the feet until he was able to take him down. But there's some things that we haven't seen from Jon Jones at heavyweight. We haven't seen how his gas tank holds up. We know that Daniel Cormier didn't have the same gas tank at heavyweight because he was carrying all that extra weight and was not used to that, right? We also saw that Jon Jones looked a little bit sloppy or funky on the feet, which I don't think he's going to try and play too much on the feet, at least not at the start of the fight because of that. He's going to look to use the grappling to find his range, maybe slow down Stipe a little bit and get Stipe worried about the takedowns, and then he'll maybe look to strike a little bit. I think that'd probably be the smarter approach as well. But we say all this just to say that there's a question in cardio for Jon Jones. Not a question in heart, but a question in cardio and how that will affect his game plan. There's a question in his striking at the heavyweight weight class. And then there's also talking about the Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes fights, to where there's also the point to where he kind of almost plays down to his opposition, right? He's been in some very close fights as of late, other than the Cyril Gane fight. And it's just been, and I just think that that's an interesting point to state, because it wasn't really to the best of competition. And maybe this is the reason he's afraid to fight Tom Aspinall, who knows? But I imagine that he's gonna come out, look to stomp on Stipe's knees. Stipe is good about checking kicks, so that'll be interesting to see how he deals with. Stipe also has good footwork on the back foot, and he has fought great grapplers in the past like Daniel Cormier and Fabricio Verdum, which he was able to nullify both of their grappling for the most part. But one thing Jon does that's very tricky is he likes to shoot off of the opponent's jab. He'll start prodding at your legs and using his jab in order to get your jab out. Once your jab comes out, he'll either go underneath and shoot at your legs with a very slick takedown. If you defend it or have good balance, then he'll just run you to the cage and start his nasty grappling from the cage. Or he may slip, get into the clinch, and look to drag you down after taking you back, looking to like mat return you, almost like he did with Cyril Gane. But either way, he looks for that jab to come out, and that's scary when you talk about a boxer like Stipe Miocic, who is gonna throw his jab. He's gonna try and box with you. He's gonna be light on that lead leg, so it's gonna be easy to pick up because he's constantly gonna be looking to check your kicks and stuff like that. And so this is kind of the ways we may see Jon Jones look for his takedowns, look to get Stipe on his back, again a wrestler on his back, look to do damage, and then eventually look for the submission, which I think is ultimately very possible and honestly probable. However, on the other side with Stipe and how he'll approach the fight, I feel like again he's going to be pretty light on that lead leg to try and check kicks, even though that's not the way you check oblique and side kicks. I think he'll also be light on the feet, using a lot of footwork to try and force Jon to come to him and pressure him, probably to draw out some of the lazy kicks that Jon sometimes throws, like he did in the Cyril Gane fight, to counter him with boxing exchanges, because again, it only takes one punch at heavyweight. I mean, we've seen Stipe have one punch knockout power at heavyweight. I mean, these are big dudes we're talking about. But I see Stipe being very basic, very fundamental, not really trying to give Jon Jones anything, maybe even using some leg kicks of his own, considering Jon Jones likes to move his head backward out of range a lot, which leaves his legs behind. And I wouldn't even be surprised if Stipe shoots a takedown just to mix it up and make Jon fearful. But ultimately, I think Stipe needs to take it the first round to kind of feel things out, let Jon burn a little bit of energy, and then that's when he starts making it a phone booth fight, like how Daniel Cormier tried to make with him. One thing about Stipe is that this dude has a heart of a lion, man. He will fight through eye pokes, he'll fight through nut shots, which we know is going to be a thing in this fight. Jon Jones is going to poke his eyes, we know it. And what he is good about doing is he's good at boxing around people's frames, which a lot of people don't understand. When people are trying to grab your hands like Daniel Cormier was, or they're reaching for that clinch, sometimes it's hard to let off traditional combinations that are going to land clean. A lot of times they get caught on the arms and things like that, because that's why people clinch up, to protect their central computer. But Stipe has an innate ability to be able to strike through those arms, find his rhythm. He doesn't neglect the body. He will go to the body if he feels like it's open. His kicks throw people off whenever he's kicking low. I think he has every chance to beat Jon Jones, and I think that if he was in his prime, or if he comes back looking like he's in his prime, bro, this is going to be a real fight, and this is going to be a tough fight for Jon Jones, because everywhere Stipe is good, wrestling, which will negate Jon Jones' wrestling, and boxing, which Jon Jones hasn't really been very good in, everywhere Stipe is good, Jon Jones seems to have some sort of hole. Not that he has a hole in the wrestling, but you know what I mean. Wrestlers usually negate. So again, I find this one very interesting. I think that this is still going to be a fun fight, and now that it's made and a week away, I think I'm excited for it. I am. However, I'm not excited for the fact that Jon Jones is avoiding Tom Aspinall blatantly. I don't think history is going to remember that very well. I won't personally let history remember that very well, just like I won't let history forget that Francis Ngannou is still the lineal heavyweight champion of the world. We must remember, history must remain truthful. And so I think Jon's being very hypocritical when he says he has nothing to gain from beating Tom Aspinall, because people had nothing to gain from fighting him when he was younger. I think that Jon's kind of just running from tough challenges. I don't think he's scared of Tom Aspinall. I think this may even be a ploy to just build up the Tom Aspinall fight even more, or to frustrate Tom Aspinall. But there are similarities between him not trying to take this Tom Aspinall fight, him choosing PEREIRA over Tom Aspinall, and the same similarity as when Chael Sonnen tried to take him on short notice and Jon Jones refused. You know what I mean? Is that your GOAT? Anyways, with that being said, leave your comments and thoughts down below. I hope you guys liked the breakdown of the X's and O's, and if you guys are wanting an official prediction, I am gonna have to go with Jon Jones. I think that's the only reasonable thing to do right now, as I just broke everything down. I think that there's a lot of things in MMA that negate a hole in the boxing department, which I think Jon still lacks. But I think Jon, the fact that he's found a way around having to box with people in his career, I think he's gonna do the same thing now. He's gonna find a way, and he's gonna get it done against a 42-year-old current firefighter, Stipe Miocic. With that being said, guys, y'all stay safe, stay blessed. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe to get more breakdowns and more insights into the MMA community. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.